country. Not a Middle Eastern country, incidentally. We went to the country because Tectane's second big weapon in the war on pollution is cultivating a super hybrid crop, again originally developed 30 years ago by the Carter administration during the 70s oil crisis, and then abandoned when oil prices came down. The crop is called sweet sorghum, and it grows faster, yields much more alcohol per acre, doesn't need pesticides, and can be used for half a dozen other amazing things, or so Tectane says. So, we went out to talk to the farmers and agronomists who don't wear suits and actually grew the crops to hear what they had to say.
Sweet sorghum, it grows many more tons, and then of course you have the seed, and then you have the shell of it that they can actually turn into.
Lee is no crusader or scientist. He's just a regular upstate New York farmer who's been looking for a viable new crop and testing the realities of using Tectane's sorghum seeds.
So we plowed this little section up right here, Nicholas, and we planted it, and the rows were really crooked because we planted it by hand, and we didn't have any way of cultivating it. So then as the weeds grew and the sorghum grew with it, I was totally convinced that it was not going to amount to anything, that the weeds were just going to choke the life right out of it. But the amazing thing is when the weeds grew their full height, which was pretty high, that sorghum started to grow, and it just kept growing, and of course, as we've had the pictures of it, it was like 12, some of it was 12 and 14 feet high. An amazing thing to see. I was literally stunned to see how that sorghum could just grow past the weeds like that and still get such tremendous height.
How high would corn normally grow?
Well, corn, it can get to 8-10 feet, and this sorghum was way up above that. And just totally amazed me because we hadn't put fertilizer, we hadn't sprayed it with anything. And once those weeds grew to their full height, then that sorghum started to come up past there, and it was just like a rocket on a rail the way it was growing. It was an amazing thing to see. If I hadn't have seen it and somebody was telling me this, as I am now, I'd be hard-pressed to believe it. Corn, again, you'll have to spray it. It's very expensive, and then you have to fertilize it. But there's no corn that I know of you could get 2 crops.
It's kind of sad to think that all this time farmers have been struggling to get by on corn, which is toxic to the earth, needs tons of expensive pesticides, and makes very little ethanol. It almost makes you think there might have been a corn cartel out there, obliging farmers to do it. So we took the next step and went to a second project at the Botanical Gardens, where 6 varieties of the crop were being tested under more focused conditions, where we spoke to Tom Fournier, who has been working with Tectane for the last 6 years, and is in fact a crusader for the wonderful world of sweet sorghum. He's become convinced that sweet sorghum will almost literally save the planet. If planted right, the sorghum has many more stems and can be planted in developing countries in arid conditions. He says we're right now between 2 worlds. We have a choice. Keep polluting the earth and the air with the wrong crops, or choose the one that could literally make the critical difference. Something to think about. And so we can't resist taking the next step and checking in on the government project Tectane has been coordinating, where the seeds themselves are analyzed and hybridized in their ceaseless quest for the seed that will save the very earth in which it's planted. We spoke to Martin Tremblay, who works at IRDA, the Quebec Government Agro Lab. Man, do they have fun down there. Checking, filing, storing, cataloging. But that's how it's done. We got Martin to kindly take us on a field project. Along the way, he also took a moment to discuss some of the ravages of corn. Again, we were here in August, so the sorghum was still at baby height. But these were many of the final contestants for Miss Super Sweet Sorghum. The winner would of course go on to the Miss World or Miss World Saver contest, which will span from here to China. Remember, the winner has to grow super fast, need much less water, yield 2 crops a year, which no ethanol crop does now, grow a gorgeous grain top, which can be used as animal feed or cereal, and have a strong, shapely stalk that can be used for countless other things. You don't win the world title by just wearing a bathing suit anymore, sister. All right, for those of you who are still fascinated, we go to the final check, the extremely hard to impress or amuse Cornell scientist for a quick opinion. Even he thought the sorghum solution was already here and ready to deploy.
But without a large investment, if some of these crops can be grown on some of these small farms, that will really help the rural communities. What I have seen has been very encouraging in terms of the crop of sweet sorghum. I was out here a couple of years ago and I observed firsthand a great crop with minimal amount of fertilizer and no weed control, and that have pictures that show that the crop was over our head. It was encouraging. I mean, there was a crop with very minimal inputs put into the ground that was higher than your head, and I was...
Meanwhile, back at the executive branch, there's a whole other benefit. The same way you can use cheap, low-octane gas with the injector, it also lets you use the cheapest ethanol as well, for the cheapest, the cleanest fuel in the world.
Ethanol basically is alcohol made from any type of cellulose crop. So whether it be from sweet sorghum, corn, sugar beet, sugar cane, or whatever, anyone can make ethanol. What we're talking about is using a different type of ethanol called hydrous ethanol. The injector is able to use hydrous ethanol with the way it works. We don't need anhydrous ethanol, which is the very expensive high-quality ethanol that's being blended with gasoline currently. The result is in more efficiency and less costs, therefore increasing your margins.
But just when you thought you were as impressed as you could be, we finally get to the interesting part, the really interesting part. As in everything else you can do besides making fuel,